Welcome to CRM Experts in Their Own Words on Forecasting Clouds. I'm Chris Buckles, Editor-in-Chief of Forecasting Clouds, and with me is Denis Pombriant.
Hey.
Dennis is the big cheese at Beagle Research.
The only cheese.
The sole cheese. And he's also a regular kind of columnist, maybe an accidental columnist for CRM Buyer.
True.
Which I am as well, so it's kind of a strange meeting of the minds here.
There you have it.
But Dennis, you've been writing a lot of interesting stuff on CRM for a while, and your take on CRM and the bigger IT ecosystem has had some interesting turns to it in the last, year or so, or 2 years, when you started focusing on concepts of sustainability and started looking at how these things fit into a much bigger global picture of not just what's sustainable for the world in terms of resources, but what's sustainable in terms of business, and how that concept needs to be thought of by businesses as they develop themselves and the way they manage data. First of all, what got you interested in that concept, and how did this sort of come to the fore in your thinking?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I'm not trying to save the world. I think of myself as a green person, but my whole emphasis has always been in trying to figure out how people can make money. And making money is an economic thing. And when changes occur in the inputs that we have in our economic processes, we necessarily have changes in the outputs. So a couple of years ago, when gasoline was over $4 a gallon, crude oil was over $140 a barrel, I started doing some back-of-the-envelope calculations, which basically went like this. If gasoline is that expensive, if jet fuel, which closely tracks it, is that expensive, then we're probably going to travel less. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the travel that we do is for business. So it could have a deleterious effect on business activity. As it turns out, according to the U.S. Department of Transportation, in the 12 months that included the gasoline price spike, Americans drove 122 billion miles less. I don't know how many air miles they didn't log, but it's significant. And travel and things associated with travel are very, very, very important to doing business.
Yeah.
We do business face-to-face. We're face-to-face now. There's a cost associated with that. For instance, there's an organization, I think it's called the United States or the U.S. Business Travel Bureau or something like that, that actually keeps statistics on how much money we spend on business travel every year. Mm-hmm. And in the most recent year, I think the number was around $254 billion. Very significant. So, long story short, when I start seeing numbers like that, and I see the cost of what used to be a commodity going very high, that commodity can't sustain itself in the economic processes.
Yeah.
So, if we're not going to be able to afford transportation at $4 a gallon or more, what do we do? And as it turns out, the software that you and I love, the industry that we're in, offers a lot of solutions.
Mm-hmm. And you're not just talking about video conferencing and telepresence type applications. There's other things as well that are much more common and commonly used already that fit into that category, aren't there?
Well, absolutely. Although, I wouldn't. When I talk about video presence, I'm not talking about a simple meeting, say, out on the internet between 3 or 4 people. Take a look at what's around us this week. We're at Dreamforce. There are 30,000 people who have traveled some distance to get here, who have gone to hotels and bought meals out, et cetera, et cetera. $254 billion a year, right? Mm-hmm. You can deploy web-based conferences today and reduce a lot of the need for that kind of travel. Now, I wouldn't say it's always as good doing something across the wires as it is doing something face-to-face, but you know what? If the choice is doing business or not doing business, I vote for doing business.
Right.
I voted for it at every election.
Well, there's an awful lot of people that travel to all these shows, and if what you're saying is sort of acted upon by these guys. It might be not just they don't see each other face to face ever. It might just be that they focus on much more important face to face events once or twice a year, and they sort of minimize their expense as far as travel.
Precisely, and the flip side of it is that if you minimize your travel using some of these modern technologies, it's not necessarily a burden. The money you save could go into doing more, not fewer, conferences. And
right.
As a result, you could have better relationships with your customers, especially if you're recording those things and making them available out on the web or asynchronously as well.
Yeah. Now, there's a direct metaphor in terms of sustainability between what goes on a macro level in the economy as a whole with regards to commodities, and I think what goes on to how companies build their customer base and the behaviors they take in terms of growing themselves. Is this something you see as well, where this metaphor of basically there's not enough to do everything you want. You've got to scale it back and prioritize and maximize efficiency. Is this something you see that's reflected down the chain from that macro level?
Absolutely, and in that regard, if you're looking at things that way, then all of a sudden you realize what an important tool analytics is. Because if you discover through analytics that your hotspot is or your hotspot in the winter is Texas and Florida and the Gulf Coast, then maybe you deploy more assets, more resources to doing business in that region. Whereas if your analytics tell you that at other times of the year people are going to Idaho to cool off, you use that. So it's the thing I think that is a misconception about green and sustainability is that it's somehow we're doing penance, or right. It's bad. We got to pay for it. Or number two, that it's something that is going to disrupt our lives so completely that it's not worth doing. When in point of fact, there's so much low-hanging fruit that at this point, it's just all good.
One of the interesting things I think we've talked about in the past is the idea that as handheld devices take the place of laptops and desktop machines for a lot of things that are being done in CRM and other applications, that's actually a cost savings. Those devices are engineered to use less energy, and in a way that transition might be painful at first, but actually could result in cost savings down the road for the users.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point, and of course those mobile devices are a lot cheaper than a desktop or a laptop computer. So, you've got that going for you, but you've also got an interesting dynamic. Those devices don't work without really good networks, so it's forcing us to upgrade our networks. So what happens when you've got great devices and great networks? Maybe you don't go to the office as often. So it's a sustainability thing, but it's also keeping you or me in front of our customers where we belong, rather than going back and forth to the office to do things that we can now do, by trading electrons.
Right. Now we're at Dreamforce, as Dennis just said, and it's been an interesting conference. A lot of interesting things have come down, and obviously the discussion about database.com, putting databases in the cloud, is a pretty interesting idea. What has been your take on what's gone on here, and have you seen any things that relate back to your premise of sustainability?
Well, because we're still here at Dreamforce, I have to tell you it's information overload.
Yeah.
So I can skim the tops of some of the waves. I think database.com is a very important innovation. I think because it sort of completes a set of technology. Prior to database.com, 48 hours ago, you could build an application in the cloud, but it would reside on a server that's not in your data center, somewhere else, on a blade, and it would be confined in the same way that licensed software is always confined. Right? It's one organization's. It's on one spindle, or it's on several spindles that need to be maintained, and they could go up, they could go down. So with database.com, all of a sudden you've got a lot of the benefits of the multi-tenant architecture that is up with between 4 and 5 nines of reliability, according to Mark, which I think is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And it also complements very well all of the application development tools and environments that are out there that need a database to complete what they do.
Yeah.
So, we've seen that with VMware and VM Force. Now there's database.com for those applications. It may prove that that's an important tool, a tipping point that enables companies to take some legacy systems and reinvent them, or just redo them to the point where they're out in the cloud and they're more efficient and they deliver several levels of benefit, and that's all goodness. So yeah, kind of important.
Yeah, it sounds like it would sort of signify a period of transition for those companies that really want to make a full cloud play of their IT ecosystems, because obviously you're not going to dump the databases you have right now after the investments you've made. You're going to transition to something.
Well, we hope you'll transition. I mean, I hope you'll transition. One of my favorite statistics in the world is that there are still 6,200 mainframes running mission-critical applications in the United States, which is a huge amount. And it dawned on me during the keynote today that one of the things that database.com presents to developers is a path, a migration path. There have been migration paths in the past. Client server was a migration path, but each path that we've had a threshold of pain, and if you could get under that threshold, you would do the migration. If you didn't, you couldn't. And progressively, those thresholds have gotten lower and lower and lower, and until we're sort of at this reduction of 6,200 mainframes, for example, and they're not the only targets, of course, but you've got 6,200 mainframes that people just don't want to even think about moving because they're so big and so complex and so difficult. And maybe database.com will be a legacy application migration path for a lot of folks. And I think that could be very valid.
Well, great. Well, Dennis, thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And this has been Denis Pombriant on CRM Experts in Their Own Words on Forecasting Clouds. Thank you very much for watching.
Bye.